Sergio, so I guess Dazn got tired of me kicking the crap out of you twice a week, so they decided to bring somebody else in to this conversation. Welcome, Carl Froch, former super middleweight champion, joining the show for the first time. Welcome, Carl.
How you doing? You good?
We're good. And we got a lot to dive into here. And I want to begin first in the 160-pound division. Jermall Charlo, WBC champion, has been on a call-out streak of late. His latest name, Gennady Golovkin, the IBF 160-pound champion. Charlo says he wants Golovkin. He says he will be the B-side for a fight against Golovkin. So, Carl, I'll ask you, do you like Jermall Charlo against Gennady Golovkin?
I certainly do. I think it's a great fight. 6 foot tall Texan lad, decent size orthodox middleweight. He's 30 years old as well, which I think is a big advantage. So, I think Gennady Golovkin's just slightly over the hill now at his age. Still a quality fighter, a marquee fighter, big puncher, and he can take a punch. And they're the two last things to go. So I'm not writing off Golovkin by any stretch of the imagination. But Charlo I just like. He's hungry, he's aggressive, he's confident, he's cocky, ballsy, he's outspoken. He's got a good dig and he can take a punch. He's got a fan-friendly style. I like it. I think this is a great fight.
Not only that, but it's old lion versus young, hungry, new lion. A lions only in Jermall Charlo. And this is what you need whenever you're at that chapter in your career where you need to prove yourself like Golovkin. Golovkin only lost one time to Canelo, and it seems like Canelo won't look his way. Well, every old champion gets to that point where they need to fight a young, hungry, up-and-coming guy, and Charlo's that name. And for Jermall Charlo, he needs a Gennady Golovkin on his resume. He needs a Hall of Famer. I mean, the best name on his resume is Derevyanchenko and maybe a Matt Korobov, but they weren't champions. They weren't Hall of Famers, and they're not monsters like Golovkin. So I love this fight, not only stylistically, but because of the resume as well.
Look, I'm fine with this fight, but what are we doing here with Jermall Charlo? I mean, we go back and forth, Sergio, you and I, about Jermall Charlo avoiding Demetrius Andrade. And that's what it is. He's avoided him over the years. You can't say there's nothing of consequence in fighting Demetrius Andrade. He has a title. You can't say there's not money behind Demetrius Andrade. Eddie Hearn was willing to pay Jermall Charlo $7 million to fight Demetrius Andrade. So, Carl, I know what Charlo's doing. Like, he is eyeing Gennady Golovkin, as you said, an aging champion, someone he can pick off at this stage of his career. But what frustrates me, and what Sergio and I talk about all the time, is that Charlo has had opportunity after opportunity to take on top-level fighters, and he hasn't done it. He is going to face Juan Montiel in June in a title defense. That is one of the worst title defenses we've seen in the last few years. So forgive me if I'm not getting all excited, Carl, about Charlo versus Golovkin when we should have seen Charlo versus Andrade last year.
Yeah, I totally see your frustration. Charlo Andrade is a great fight that probably should have happened, but is he being managed well? Is he looking after himself? Is he? I don't know. I mean, the Triple G fight for Charlo is massive, and if he can beat Triple G, albeit a fading Triple G, it's still a massive name, a marquee name that's going to really propel his career to that next level. So, if he goes in there and does the job against Triple G, you would say all of a sudden you might change your opinion on him and say, you know what a great move. Because good fighters always still have to be steered in the right direction, and maybe that's what he's doing.
Look, man, I'm talking as a boxing fan. I'm going to say Charlo Golovkin, because we know what Golovkin is going to bring to the table, and that's destruction. And we know what Charlo brings to the table, that bad boy image. It's a perfect promotion as well. So yeah, I'm speaking as a fan here, but as a boxer, as someone that knows the struggle of Andrade doing everything he needs to do to get the big fights, knowing how good he is, knowing that he's a southpaw, knowing that he's an Olympian, he's a champion, knowing that he can actually probably beat these big guys that I'm talking about, probably even give Canelo everything he can handle. I know that this will be a good fight, but as a fan, give me Golovkin.
Now, I've been trying to will Charlo Andrade into existence. It seems more and more that fight is never going to happen. All right, guys, there's a lot of chatter out there now about Canelo Alvarez being unbeatable from anywhere to 160 to 175 pounds. Canelo is 30 years old, and he has 3 pieces of the 168-pound title. But as you guys look back at boxing history, who in their prime did you consider the most unbeatable, Carl?
I've got to say, And there's a couple of names. There's a couple of names out there, but I'll just go straight in with Roy Jones Jr. In his prime, at 168 pounds, I just think it was impossible to beat. He was so fast. His reflexes and defense was so effective. He was so technically proficient that I would not see how you beat him. He's got that speed and skill coupled with the power punch. I just thought he was an absolute menace and just brilliant to watch.
I thought you were going to say Andre Ward, Carl, but okay. No, I can't go. You can't go wrong with Roy Jones Jr. I mean, he was Superman in the 90s, but he did have that blemish with Montel Griffin. I'm going to go with the Culpe Alto, Puerto Rico, Felix Trinidad. He dominated the entire decade. He beat, legends like Camacho, and he beat, legends like Pernell Whitaker and Oscar De La Hoya. And I think he was untouchable. He was lethal with that left hook. He was exciting. He carried the whole country on his back, and no one could touch him in the 90s. He was a beast. At 147, no one beat him.
All right, we really can't hold Montel Griffin against Roy Jones, because then he followed it up by obliterating Griffin in that rematch. That was not a real blemish on his resume. I am going to go, though, Carl, with your old rival, Andre Ward. Because Andre Ward, throughout the decade that he was most active in, he fought the best. He entered the Super Six and fought all the best guys in that weight class, including you, and he won all those fights. And aside from your fight with him and the first fight against Sergey Kovalev, he won wide. He was winning 120-108 or 118-110 on most of these scorecards. So I look at Ward as being, during those prime years of his, as being the most unbeatable. You tell me, Carl, if you fought Ward 10 times, how many times would you win?
Me, maybe twice, because maybe I catch him and knock him spark out. But if Roy Jones Jr. fights him 10 times, Roy Jones Jr. wins 10 times. So there you have it. He wins. Andre Ward wins, but he wins ugly. Nobody wants to see somebody win ugly time after time after time. You can't sell him. This is an entertainment business. You can't stick Ward at number one. Roy Jones Jr.
Carl, let me look. We're
maybe
all
number
giving,
3, number 4, but not number 1. Come on.
We're all giving different guys out here as opinions. But I would say this, I tend to agree. Roy was unbeatable during those prime years. However, at his best, he wasn't always facing the top competition. He did face some of the best guys out there, but there were a lot of fights he had, the mandatory challenges, that weren't the top guys. I picked Ward because from 2009 to 2017, I mean, how many gimmies did he have on his resume? There was like Edwin Rodriguez when he moved up, maybe had one or two others at 175. Paul Smith was on his resume as well. But for the most part, Carl, he was fighting all the best guys. Outside of Lucien Bute, who you beat, he fought everybody who could fight at 168.
Yeah, he didn't want to fight Bute when he was unbeaten. He didn't fancy that. And my fight with him was quite close, but I've got to be honest, I thought I'd lost wider on the night than 115, 113 on 2 scores. Listen, the guy beat me, so it does me a favour to big him up because, Andre was first ballot Hall of Famer and is a top guy. He's not lost since he was 12 years old, but it's just the fact that he wins so ugly. I think he was a high school wrestling champion. He knows how to hold, he knows how to get his head on your chest. He's awkward with his shots. And I mean, when he beat Mikkel Kessler, it was headbutts. That's what it was. When he beat Kovalev in the rematch, it was low blows. And it's just not pretty to watch. So if I'm going to get excited about a fighter and put a fighter right up there with the best of the best, I'm sorry, but Andre Ward's maybe in my top 5.
Do you really think he beat Kovalev on low blows, though? Because I was at both those fights. I thought Kovalev deserved to win in the first one, but Ward kind of beat the. I thought Ward beat the fight out of him in that first fight. I don't think that in the second fight he was the same.
I agree, but the referee should have given him 5 minutes, let him carry on, but he did. He kind of quit, didn't he? He'd had enough. Andre Ward had beat it out of him, but there's no question the blows were low. He hit him with low blows. He's messy, he's ugly, he's horrible. I'd never rewatch one of his fights. Roy Jones Jr., I get excited about watching a fight with Roy Jones, even if I've seen it 10 times already. So that's why I put him up there with one of the best in his time.
Sergio, last word.
Hey, Carl, welcome to Jabs. I was just jabbing you about Andre Ward, and there comes Chris Mannix actually telling you that, Andre Ward was unbeatable. But no. You can't compare Superman in the 90s like Roy Jones Jr. or even Felix Trinidad. But Mannix with that Andre Ward line.
Nobody here is saying that Roy Jones wouldn't beat Andre Ward. I'm just talking about in their prime years, Roy Jones, clearly unbeatable. To your point, Sergio, Felix Trinidad, clearly unbeatable. But in Ward's prime years, he fought the best and was unbeaten. So I'm not sure how you can't say he was unbeatable.
So you are saying then that Roy Jones Jr. beats Andre Ward. Thank you for that. I appreciate that, because that's what we think.
Y'all must have forgot.
Which makes him number one.
Before Sergio starts rapping, we're going to wrap this up.